Sagittarius, the trap you built for yourself without realizing it. You were born to run with the wind, to chase horizons no one else dares to follow. Freedom isn't just something you crave, it's the pulse in your veins. And yet here you are, feeling heavier than you'd like to admit. Not because someone has chained you, but because somewhere along the way you began weaving your own invisible cage. It happened so quietly. A little silence to keep the peace. A little compromise so no one feels left behind. A little dimming of your spark so others don't feel outshone. Felt harmless, even noble. But piece by piece, those small concessions became the bars of a prison you didn't notice you were building. The most dangerous traps are not the ones forced upon us. They're the ones we construct ourselves in the name of loyalty, harmony, or love. And here's the truth you've been avoiding. You still hold the key. In this moment, I'm not here to judge you, but to hold up a mirror so you can see both the beauty of your heart and the ways it's been holding you back. This is your invitation to unlock the door, to remember the sound of your own laughter echoing in wide open spaces. If these words find you, stay with me until the end. And if they awaken something inside, like share and subscribe, so more Sagittarius souls can remember the wings they were never meant to fold. Gate 1. When humility becomes a habit. Sagittarius, your spirit was never built to be small. You were born under a sky that calls you to expand, to roam, to stretch your arms wide toward the horizon and claim the wind as your companion. Yet somehow, without realizing it, you've learned to fold those arms in, tuck in your elbows, and move through life as if you're afraid of taking up too much space. Not because you lack confidence, no, deep down you still know your fire burns brightly, but because over time you've confused kindness with self-erasure. It always begins in moments so small they're almost invisible. A friend shares their troubles, and you quietly push your own pain aside to hold space for theirs. Someone questions your dream, and you soften your voice, making it sound less grand, less urgent, so they won't feel left behind. At first, it's not even a decision, it's instinct. You are adaptable, empathetic, and you tell yourself, this is what love looks like. This is what harmony feels like. But harmony, Sagittarius, is not always peace. Sometimes it's silence disguised as peace, your silence. And each time you bite back your truth, each time you dim your joy so someone else can feel more comfortable, a tiny piece of you slips quietly out of the room. I remember a client, let's call her Elise, a radiant Sagittarius with eyes that sparkled when she spoke about her art. She once had this wild dream of painting an entire mural across a city wall, a celebration of color and movement. But when she mentioned it to her partner, they smiled politely and said, that's nice, but maybe start smaller? Big projects can fail, and I don't want you to be disappointed. Elise nodded, thinking they were just being realistic. She shelved the idea for now. A year later, she wasn't painting murals or even small canvases. She was barely painting at all. The flame that once roared had become a flicker. Not because anyone told her outright she couldn't do it, but because she kept lowering her light to match someone else's comfort level. This is how humility, when misplaced, turns into a habit. A subtle, creeping surrender of your own rhythm. It's like standing in a room with music you love blasting through the speakers. At first, someone asks you to turn it down just a little. Out of consideration, you do. Then another person asks again and you comply. Over time, without anyone needing to say a word, you live in near silence. The song is still playing inside you, but it's so faint, you have to strain to hear it. And you start to forget what it felt like to dance freely to your own beat. The danger here is that you begin to mistake your silence for virtue. You tell yourself, I'm easygoing. I don't need to insist on my way. I'm adaptable. But adaptability without boundaries is not kindness. It's slow self-abandonment. And the tragedy is, most people don't notice you're doing it. They don't see the internal negotiations you have with yourself every time you agree to less than you want. It's like carrying a suitcase full of unspoken dreams. You drag it with you everywhere, but you never open it, because you're afraid someone might see what's inside and think you're too much. The longer you keep it closed, the heavier it feels. Eventually, it becomes so heavy you stop traveling altogether, not physically but in your soul. You settle into smaller versions of yourself, not realizing that you've been slowly teaching the world how to treat you. As someone who will always yield, who will always step back. And Sagittarius, here's the paradox. You think you're preserving the relationship by doing this, but the truth is the relationship is no longer with the full, vibrant you. It's with a watered-down version. The people who truly belong in your life don't want a smaller you. They don't need you to compress your dreams into bite-sized, non-threatening portions. If they do, it's not because they love you, it's because they love the version of you that fits their world without challenging it. Imagine a candle and a bonfire. The candle burns quietly, its light modest, contained. The bonfire roars, sending sparks into the night, drawing people from miles away. Both give light, but the energy they create is completely different. You Sagittarius are the bonfire. Yet over time you've been trimming your own flames until you look more like the candle, steady, safe, unassuming. Why? Because somewhere along the way you equated humility with safety. You told yourself, if I shine too brightly, I might blind someone. If I speak too loudly, I might drown someone out. If I dream too big, I might lose the people I care about. But here's the truth you've been avoiding. The people who are meant to walk with you will adjust their eyes to your brightness. They will raise their voices to meet yours. They will dream bigger alongside you. When humility becomes a habit, it stops being a conscious act of love and becomes an unconscious act of fear. Fear of being too much, fear of being abandoned, fear of disrupting a fragile balance. But love without honesty is not love. It's performance. And every performance has a cost. The cost here is your vitality. So the question you must ask yourself is this: how many of my it's fine moments have actually been quiet concessions of my soul? How many times have I mistaken the relief of avoiding conflict for the deeper peace of living authentically? I know you, Sagittarius. You have endured storms, crossed oceans, and followed roads others were too afraid to take. You were never meant to shrink to fit into someone else's room. You were meant to expand so wide that you build a bigger room, or better yet, knock down the walls entirely. Humility is a beautiful thing when it's chosen with awareness. But when it becomes the default, when you no longer even notice you're doing it, it becomes the first lock on the invisible trap you've built around yourself. And you, more than any sign, deserve to live outside that cage. It's time to check the volume of your life, Sagittarius. If it's too quiet, it's not because the song has stopped. It's because you've been turning the dial down for too long. Turn it back up. Let the music spill out of the windows. The right people will dance with you. The wrong ones will walk away. Either way, you'll be free. Gate 2. When you agree to stay in the safe box. Sagittarius, you've always been the sign of the seeker. The one who feels the pull of the unknown like a heartbeat echoing from beyond the horizon. Yet here you are, pacing inside a box that you didn't build entirely yourself, but one you've learned to stay in. Not because you've lost your curiosity, but because somewhere along the line, you began to equate safety with survival and movement with risk. It rarely starts with an outright, no you can't. The walls aren't made of brick. They're made of subtle suggestions, cautious warnings, and well-meaning advice that drips like water onto your fire until you start thinking the warmth of embers is enough. Someone you love worries about your next adventure, so you slow down to reassure them. You hear a faint edge of doubt in their voice when you speak about a bold goal, so you soften it, reframe it, make it sound smaller, less urgent. And before you realize it, you've stopped speaking about it at all. The box is comfortable, familiar. There are no sharp winds in here, no unpredictable storms. But there is also no sunrise that floods your senses with awe, no mountains that burn your muscles as you climb, no oceans that challenge you with their depth. Inside the box, life is steady, and yet something in you aches, a quiet, almost imperceptible throb that only grows louder in the silence. I once worked with a Sagittarius man named Daniel, who had dreamed of living abroad since he was a teenager. He had saved money, researched cities, and even learned the language of the country he loved. But he stayed. Year after year, he told himself he was waiting for the right time. First it was because his parents needed him close. Then because he was in a relationship. Then because he got a promotion at work. Every reason was reasonable, and every reason was also a chain link in the fence of that box. 10 years later, he realized the right time had never arrived. The truth? The box had become his home. The door was always open, but walking out meant accepting that not everyone would come with him. That's the unspoken cost of freedom, Sagittarius. The understanding that not everyone will follow you into the vastness you crave. Some people will love you more when you are within reach, predictable, familiar. And because you value connection deeply, you tell yourself that your dreams can wait until later. But later has a way of evaporating into never. It's a dangerous illusion. believing that by staying in the box, you are protecting your relationships, your sense of belonging. What you're actually doing is teaching yourself to live on half-breaths. You're convincing yourself that the air in here is enough, even though you were born to inhale the wind of the world at full force. Think of a ticket you've been holding in your hand, maybe not a literal one, but the kind that represents a leap you've been dreaming of. You keep it safe, tucked away, waiting for that perfect alignment of circumstances. But tickets have dates, even if they're invisible. They have seasons. The longer you wait, the more faded it becomes, until one day you realize you've been clutching a relic, not a passage to the life you imagined. The safe box doesn't look like a prison from the inside because it's lined with familiarity, with people you care about, with routines that make you feel anchored. But an anchor, when never lifted, becomes the weight that keeps you from moving at all. And movement is your lifeblood, Sagittarius. Not just physical travel, but expansion in every form. Emotional, intellectual, spiritual. You might be telling yourself, I'll go when they're ready, or I'll take the leap when it won't upset anyone. But here's a truth that may sting. That day may never come. The people who are hesitant about your growth will always have reasons for you to wait. And as long as you keep agreeing, you're not just delaying your life, you're slowly convincing yourself that this smaller life is all you deserve. The irony is, you think you're protecting the bond by staying put, but genuine connection can only survive if it's rooted in truth. And the truth is, your spirit is restless here. You can decorate the box, make it cozy, fill it with moments that feel sweet, but deep down, you know it's still a container, not the wide open field you crave. So why do you stay? Because leaving means confronting fears you've kept buried. The fear of disappointing someone, of losing their approval, of finding yourself alone on the path. It's easier to imagine the safety of the box than to imagine the ache of walking into the unknown without their blessing. But Sagittarius, you must remember, the box is not neutral. It is slowly, steadily dulling your edges, dimming your instincts, and numbing the pulse that used to guide you toward the next horizon. The safe box feels less like a trap because you've agreed to it. But consent doesn't make it any less confining. The door is open, yes, but it will never be easier to step out than it is today. Every day you wait, the comfort grows deeper, the muscles for leaping grow weaker, and the memory of the wind fades just a little more. One day you will have to decide whether you want to keep living inside a life that fits neatly around you, or whether you are ready to push through that threshold into something larger, wilder, and far more uncertain. Because uncertainty is not your enemy, Sagittarius, stagnation is. And you will find that the moment you step outside the box, your lungs will remember how to breathe fully again. The world will rush in with all its chaos and beauty, and you will wonder how you ever convinced yourself that safety was enough. Gate 3. When you fear your own light. Sagittarius, the strangest thing about the safe box you've been in is that it doesn't just keep the outside world from reaching you. It keeps your own brilliance contained. And here's the paradox. You are afraid of what will happen if you let that brilliance all the way out. Not because you doubt its worth, but because you know the moment you shine at full force, everything will change. You see, people around you are used to a certain version of you. They know the approachable light, the safe glow, the warmth that comforts but doesn't burn too brightly. And you've learned how to dial your radiance up and down depending on who you're with, almost like a dimmer switch. It's not dishonesty, it's adaptation. But over time, that adaptation has become a habit, and the habit has become a kind of self-erasure. I remember working with a Sagittarius woman named Lila, who was a gifted artist. Her paintings were vivid, unapologetically bold, when she created in solitude. But in group exhibitions, she chose to display her softer, more muted pieces. "I don't want to make the others feel overshadowed," she told me. What she didn't realize was that by holding back, she wasn't just protecting others from discomfort. She was depriving herself of the life that comes from being fully seen. And when she was honest with herself, the truth was even more uncomfortable. She was afraid that if she let her full force out, she might lose people who couldn't handle it. This is the quiet fear that lives in so many Sagittarius hearts. The fear that your expansion will cost you love, that your growth will change the balance of relationships you treasure, that the people who once celebrated you will feel left behind or worse, start resenting you. And so, instead of galloping freely into the horizon, you pace in circles within a smaller pasture, telling yourself you can still see the sky from here. But here's what's dangerous about fearing your own light. The longer you keep it dim, the easier it is to believe that it was never that bright to begin with. You begin to doubt your own fire, to wonder if maybe you've been overestimating yourself. And that is the real trap, not just being limited by others but beginning to limit yourself because you've forgotten what full illumination feels like. Think of a musician who can play with breathtaking skill, but who practices with a mute on the strings so the sound won't disturb anyone. Eventually, they start believing that the quiet, dampened notes are the whole truth of their ability. When the mute is finally removed, the raw volume feels almost dangerous, not because it is, but because they've become accustomed to smallness. Fearing your own light often comes disguised as kindness. You tell yourself you're being considerate. You say, "I don't want to make them uncomfortable," or, "I don't want to outshine anyone." But here's the truth. Your light was never meant to be measured against someone else's. It exists to fulfill your path, your purpose, your joy. And if your light inadvertently makes someone uncomfortable, that discomfort belongs to them, not to you. There's another layer here, Sagittarius. On some level, you know that shining fully will require change, maybe big change, a different career, a different environment, sometimes even different relationships. And the human heart, no matter how adventurous, still clings to the comfort of the familiar. Your mind says, if I keep things small, I can keep things the same. But the soul knows, same is not what you came here for. I've seen Sagittarians step into their full light and lose people they thought would be there forever. And yes, it hurts, but I've also seen them gain something far greater. Relationships, opportunities, and experiences that align with their unfiltered self. You cannot meet the life you were meant for if you keep hiding the parts of you that are meant to guide the way. It's worth asking yourself, when was the last time I felt truly seen? Not for what I can do for others, not for the version of me they find easiest to love, but for the entirety of my being. If you can't remember, it's likely because you haven't given yourself permission to show it. Sagittarius, you are ruled by Jupiter, the planet of expansion, abundance, and growth. Your light isn't an accessory, it's your compass. It's the force that leads you toward the people and places where you will flourish. To fear it is to fear your own destiny. And here's the final truth of this gate. You cannot protect people from the journey they need to take simply by keeping yourself small. If your light exposes their shadows, it might just be the invitation they need to step into their own. And if they choose not to, that's their path, not your burden. So stand still for a moment. Feel the weight of all the ways you've dimmed yourself. And then imagine what would happen if you removed every filter, every adjustment, every quiet compromise. Let the thought scare you. Let it thrill you. And then remember, the world has been waiting for the sound of your full song, the blaze of your unrestrained fire. It's time to let it all the way out. Gate 4. When you realize the trap was always in your hands, there comes a moment, Sagittarius, when the fog lifts. When you're no longer blaming circumstances, timing, or even the quiet influences of the people around you. When you stand in the middle of your own life and realize, with both heartbreak and relief, that the cage you've been in all along was built, maintained, and locked by you. Not out of malice toward yourself, but out of fear disguised as love, out of loyalty disguised as responsibility, out of caution disguised as wisdom. This realization can be sharp, like the sudden snap of a rope you didn't know was fraying. Or it can be slow, dawning over weeks, months, even years, like the way sunlight gradually fills a darkened room. But however it comes, it changes everything. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. I once worked with a Sagittarius man named Elias, who had turned down multiple career offers that would have taken him abroad. On the surface, his reasons seemed noble. His aging parents needed him nearby. His partner wasn't ready to relocate. His friends counted on him. But one day, while we talked, he admitted something he'd never said aloud. No one told me I couldn't go. I told myself that. I didn't even ask. I decided for everyone before they had the chance to decide for themselves. In that moment, he saw that the door had been open the whole time. He just never walked through it. And that's the strange, uncomfortable power of this gate. The moment you realize no one has truly been holding you back. Yes, there have been influences, unspoken pressures, even subtle disapprovals. But in the end, you are the one who has adjusted, delayed, minimized, or redirected your own path. You are the one who has kept the key in your pocket. This is not about blame. Blame locks you in just as much as fear does. This is about ownership. It's about looking yourself in the eye and saying, if I built this, I can dismantle it. If I lock this, I can unlock it. That's where your power has been all along. Not in waiting for someone else to set you free, but in recognizing you've always had the ability to do it yourself. The truth is, Sagittarius, your nature is not meant for containment. Jupiter, your ruling planet, thrives in expansion. Every time you've tried to shrink to fit a space, whether that's a relationship, a career, or a self-image, you felt the ache of misalignment. And yet you stayed. Why? Because staying in the familiar cage felt safer than facing the unknown wild. But here's the revelation of this gate. Safety was never the point of your soul's journey. Growth was. And growth requires risk. It requires you to step beyond the lines you've drawn around yourself, to endure the trembling uncertainty of the first step into open terrain. Think of a lion raised in captivity. For years, the bars of the enclosure are all it knows. One day, the door is left open. The lion hesitates. The world beyond looks vast, unpredictable, even dangerous. But here's the truth. The cage no longer exists the moment the lion decides to step through. The danger is real, yes, but so is the freedom. And in that freedom lies the only life it was ever meant to live. When you realize the trap was always in your hands, something profound happens. The excuses you've used for years lose their power. The stories you've told about why now isn't the right time start to sound hollow. And the people you thought were holding you back? You see them for what they are, mirrors, not jailers. They reflected your own hesitation, but they never truly had control over you. This is where your courage must rise. Not the kind of courage that's flashy or reckless, but the quiet, steady courage that says, I will take the next step, even if I don't know exactly where it will lead. It's the kind of courage that allows you to feel fear without letting it choose your future. And here's the part that might surprise you. When you finally use the key you've been holding, not everyone will resist. Some will cheer for you. Some will quietly respect you, even if they can't follow where you're going. And yes, a few will step back because your freedom disrupts the dynamics they were comfortable with. Let them. That's not cruelty, it's nature. When you grow, the ecosystem of your life shifts. Some people will adapt, others will drift away. Both are part of the truth you've been avoiding. So Sagittarius, stand there for a moment with the key in your hand. Feel the weight of it. Feel the responsibility and the privilege of it. And then turn it. Step out. Not in defiance, but in alignment. Not because you're running away from the past, but because you're finally ready to meet the future on your own terms. Because here's the deepest secret of this gate. The moment you walk through, you'll see that the sky you've been longing for was never far away. You've been under it the whole time. The bars were only ever in your mind. Conclusion: walking out of the cage. Sagittarius, we've walked together through each gate, each layer of truth you've been carrying. From the quiet beginnings of shrinking yourself for peace, to the self-imposed limits of your own safe box, to the fear of your own brilliance, and finally to the piercing recognition that you have been holding the key all along, this has been a journey of returning to yourself. Here's what I want you to remember. Not all cages are built of steel and stone. Some are woven from patterns so familiar you mistake them for comfort. Some are made of loyalties so deep they feel like sacred oaths. And some are made of your own careful compromises, the moments you said, I'll stay here a little longer, until a little longer became years. But Sagittarius, you were never meant to live in a cage, no matter how safe or well decorated it is. You were born under a sign ruled by Jupiter, the planet of expansion, discovery, and boundless possibility. You are the archer who aims beyond the horizon, the wanderer who thrives in open air, the seeker whose soul is fed by the unknown. The longer you stay small to keep the peace, the more you withhold your own life's true story. So ask yourself now, with honesty, with tenderness, what would happen if you chose differently? If you stopped waiting for permission? If you trusted that the people meant to walk beside you would not be scared off by your fullest light? The truth is, those who truly love you want to see you soar, even if it means they have to watch you from a distance. Stepping out will feel uncertain. You will not have a map for every mile ahead. But you don't need one. Your compass has always been inside you. In your instincts, your passions, your longing for more. The gates we've spoken about today are not obstacles. They are invitations. Each one asks, are you ready to remember who you are? And when you finally walk through that last one, you'll find that nothing and no one can hold you anymore. Except the dreams you choose to commit to. That's the kind of freedom worth living for. If you felt this message resonate deep in your chest, it's because some part of you already knows it's time. So let this be your sign. Don't just think about the life waiting for you outside the cage. Go live it. I'm Sophia, and this is Zodiac Wisdom. If this journey spoke to your spirit, I invite you to like, share, and subscribe, not just to support the channel, but to remind yourself that you are part of a community that believes in your limitless horizons. There are more stories, more truths, and more gates ahead. And I promise you won't have to walk through them alone.